There we are. Hello, everyone. All right, let me go to the top of the chat here. So the first one in the chat. So looking at locations, we have Antwerp, Belgium, and we also have Olympia, Washington. So we have those are the first two that I see in the chat features. So we're glad to have all of you here. There's a lot of people from all over the place. Liz, I was telling you, we have England, we have the Netherlands. Let's see, all over the place. Canada. We're glad to have all of you here for this first steps. Los Angeles, there we go. We're glad to have all of you. My name is Tyler with Bedford Camera and Video. And here is the, please subscribe. We're gonna have a lot, we're gonna have some more live streams with Capture One in the future. So please, sign up and keep up to date with those events. We'd love to see you. Let me turn this off. I do want to, let me go to the right thing here. I want to introduce Maria and Liz with Capture One. We're so glad to have both of you here.
Hi, it's great to be here. Looking forward to start with our first class.
Absolutely. I want to let everybody know, if you have any questions or comments, please put that in the chat feature here on YouTube. We want to make sure that we are answering the questions in an efficient manner. We will answer those at the end of the presentation. So please put your questions in. We will pull common questions together. And also, let's see here. Yeah, put your questions in the chat feature here, as well as, sorry, let me move over here. So my name is Tyler with Bedford Camera and Video. We're glad to have all of you here. We have a pretty wide audience here, and this is a lot of fun. If you haven't used Capture One, go to their website, download their trial, play along. And I do recommend when Maria goes to the presentation, maybe make your screen full screen so you can see all of the tools and the different sections that she's referencing. Again, I wanted to thank Maria and Liz for being here and getting your feet, helping us get our feet wet in this software. So Liz or Maria, I'm going to let you take it over from here.
All right, so thanks everyone for joining. We have a very big crowd today. I'm really happy about that, and I'm very excited to be here with all of you. So this is an introduction to Capture One. This class is meant for people who have not worked with Capture One ever, or that might be starting with Capture One and they don't really know where to start editing or how to start organizing your photos. So this class is for all of you out there, and I hope it's going to be useful. As we said before, this is the first one of a 4-part series. So that means that we will be back here at Bedford's channel along this whole year. So as he said, subscribe and don't miss it. We're not going to go too deep into anything specific today. So what we're going to do is going to have a basic overview of some of the tools, some of the features. I'll give you some clues on how to start organizing a catalog. So yeah, we have a pretty packed agenda. We'll use styles for editing. For those of you who are completely new to Capture One, I will try not to miss anything, not to take anything for granted. So styles are what we call presets in other software. So they're called styles in Capture One. We'll be using some of those. And yeah, this is the first session today, but we will have more centered around workflow and landscape editing. So make sure to stay tuned. And without further ado, I'm just going to share my screen. And, let's learn some Capture One today. Of course, if you have some questions along the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. My colleague Liz will be moderating. And I also, from time to time, will try to take a look. I might not be able to answer all of the questions as we go, but also I will leave some time in the end for questions and answers, like from 10 to 15 minutes, depends on how many questions there are. And I hope there are plenty. So let's do that. Let's share my screen and let's just get started. Okay. So this is the Capture One interface. So this is what you're going to see basically when you open Capture One for the first time, as soon as you import some photos, of course. And I know that it can be a little bit overwhelming with Capture One. I know this because I'm usually teaching this kind of webinars, and I hear the comments from all of you guys out there, and it's like, okay, there is a lot of stuff into this interface. It might not be super intuitive at first. So yeah, I'm going to start by explaining the interface, okay? This is the interface that we have by default, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be changed, okay? Something that you must know about Capture One is that pretty much everything is customizable. So if we wanted to change to another interface, there might be some Lightroom users out there. I'm going to use this chance to ask you openly, what is it that you're using right now for raw editing? Is it Capture One already? Is it Lightroom? Is it another software? You're just completely new to shooting raw, just for me to know a little bit of where we are standing today. And while you answer that, I'm going to show you different workspaces that you can use. So up here in the upper menu, we have different choices. As you can see, we have an item called window, and then below we have workspace. And then we have different workspaces that come pre-established with the software. So you don't have to do anything. Basically, when you download Capture One, these are going to be here already. So we have the default. This is what I'm showing right now. And then we have different softwares, right? Sorry, different workspaces. So for those of you Lightroom users out there, and I can see that there's plenty, there is a workspace called migration. So if I choose this one, what's going to happen is that the whole interface is going to change completely. Thumbnails are going to appear on the bottom, and the tools are going to be on the right. And even when we go here into this tool tab for editing, we're going to get the same tools as we do have in Lightroom right now, and we're going to get them in the same order. It's not going to be exactly the same as Lightroom, but it's supposed to make things a little bit easier for those of you who are already used to working in a certain way. And I do appreciate that muscular memory is something real, so we might be used to going with the cursor tool from one side to the other, or to use certain keyboard shortcuts. So all of those are things that you can customize in Capture One. Other workspace that I think it's interesting to show for those of you out there that are, I can see some people are new to RAW, so maybe you want to start with this simplified workspace instead. The simplified workspace is closer visually to the standard from Capture One, but what's gonna change is that instead of getting a lot of tools, we're just going to get the basic tools, okay, to start with. So tools that you might already know from other editing softwares like white balance, exposure, highlight and shadow recovery, and some things like that. Then here we're going to get some styles or presets, as we call them in Capture One. And then here it's a library that it's common to all of the workspaces, and this is where the file management magic is going to happen. So I can see some people are having issues with the resolution. I don't know if it's only one person or if there is any complaints about this, I can try to fix it, but just let me know if it's okay for you. While you do that, I'm going to go back to the default workspace. So all the way back to default. I'm going to show you with the default because that's what everyone gets when we use Capture One for the first time. So just to make it as standard as possible. And now let's see a little bit deeper what's happening into this default workspace. So we have here on the left all of these different tool tabs. And these tool tabs are going to be like boxes where different tools are going to be located. And all of them follow a more or less logical order. It's quite logical, actually. I just don't agree with one thing, but the rest of it, it's quite logical to me. So first, on the folder icon, we have, as I said, the library. The library is common to all workspaces, and this is where we manage our files. So in here, we're going to find like recent files. This is a session. We have sessions and catalogs as ways to organize our files. You're letting me know that resolution is fine. So, okay, I'll just follow through. In Capture One, we have both sessions and catalogs to organize our files. Today, I will not be going into detail about this because this topic can be a little bit dense. This is why we are actually dedicating one full session for workflow, right? So stay tuned. That's going to be actually the next one. So yeah, I will not go into detail today because I don't want it to be too overwhelming. I want to show you today, the purpose of this whole thing is to show you that Capture One can actually be quite simple to start with. So in any case, library, here we have session folders or session favorites, albums that we also get into catalogs, and some system folders, so you can navigate through your computer folders if you want to. And here we have filters that will help us to organize our files. This is the first tool tab. The second tool tab, I'm also going to leave for the next presentation. This is the tethering tools. For those of you who don't know what tethering is a capture mode where instead of shooting to your SD card with your camera, what you're going to do is you're going to attach your camera to your computer through a USB cable, and then the camera is going to show up right here in Capture One, and your files, instead of being saved into the camera SD card, they're going to be saved directly into your computer. You can do live file management, and most importantly, you can see all of your photos instantly in your monitor. You can do that with any kind of computer, with any kind of laptop. And the good thing about it is that instead of just seeing the small previews in the camera screen, you're going to get a full view of your images right away. And also you can control your camera. You can change the settings in your camera. You can mess around with the menus. You can use the live view, change focus, plenty of super cool stuff that I'm going to save for the next time, where we will have an actual tethering demo. But it's like really simple. And if you're interested, meanwhile, to know more about it, just to let you know that there is tons of tutorials in our YouTube channel, Capture One. So yeah, just for you to know that. Then we have different tools that I can already start showing you. So as I said, everything is more or less in a logical order. This is the lens correction. This is the cropping, rotation, keystone, everything related to composition, more or less. So for example, if we want to crop, then we can just take the cropping tool here and apply different croppings. We can apply different aspect ratios. By default, it's going to come original. It means like it will just respect whatever format your camera sensor has. So you can just crop your images, for example, or you can just change, move around the rotation, pretty self-explanatory, I guess. For all of you, those of you who are new, also we have here a lot of cursor tools. These are like shortcuts to these tools. So for example, you have the hand that I'm having right now, and the hand is like meant to zoom in 100% and move around the photo. Then we have brushes. We have also cropping and rotation here. I tend to use cropping from this part of the interface, from the cursor tools menu, because it's just like more direct, but this is up to you. Many things in Capture One can be used from different locations in the interface, but just choose the one that suits you better and stick to that, and that's my advice. Next to the lens correction and cropping tools, we do have the color tools. And in the next different tool tabs, you're going to see that some tools are actually repeated. Those are the histogram and the layer panels. So you can edit with layers in Capture One, and they are very integrated into the whole workflow. You're going to see some of it today and along the next sessions. And this is the reason why the layer panel is repeated, okay? So it's because we're going to use it with many different tools in many different tool tabs. This is already edited. So of course, this is an image preview. The special thing about Capture One is that being a raw editor, you can play around a lot with your photos, of course, as in any other raw editor, but what you're going to get from the beginning, from the moment you import your photos, is that they're going to appear sharper and the colors are going to appear more accurate. And that's because of this little tool that we have here. It's called base characteristics. And this is where the camera profiles are stored. So in Capture One, we are creating different camera profiles for each of the compatible cameras in the market. And most cameras nowadays are compatible. And instead of applying generic profiles, what we are doing is that we are creating tailor-made profiles for each camera. So we are basically adapting how we are interpreting the raw data from your camera according to how your camera actually captures reality. So this is what makes it look better from the moment you bring your files into Capture One. And this is the reason why I started to use Capture One for the first time, long before I started working for Capture One, in case you're wondering. And this, like, for me was a game changer, because I imported my photos into the software and I was like, wow, I still didn't do anything. And it already looks much closer to what I used to remember, to what I saw when the moment I took this photo. So this was really life-changing for me. And it's also actually the moment when I started to enjoy editing, which is something that I used to hate a lot, despite what you might think right now. So yeah, that happened. And it's really hard to explain actually in a session like that, like how is it better? I don't want to get too technical. So my best recommendation for you who are still not using Capture One is, like, just go out there or download the Capture One trial, import your own files, and you actually see what I mean. So what I was with the tools, yeah, we have the base characteristics. Also, the profiles are applied automatically, so it's just recognized by the software, so you don't have to apply them manually, of course. And if you go to any other camera file like that, for example, you're going to see that the camera is recognized automatically. So here we have, below the base characteristics, we have all things color. So color editor, color balance, some really cool tools actually to work with color in Capture One that you're going to see some of them today, and then we're going to leave some of them for other days. Next to the color tool tabs, we have basic tools and exposure. As you can see, the histogram and layers are repeated over here, and then below we have things like exposure, high dynamic range, clarity, curves, everything. Then we would move on to all things detail, so focus, sharpening, noise reduction, and film grain. This is where we can control all of our sharpening and noise reduction and film grain. So basically things that are related to detail. On the next one, we have styles and presets. So as I said, this is like pre-made adjustments. So if I wanted to apply, let's say, a black and white style to this photo, we would just see like just by hovering over the style name, we can see a preview, and then we want to apply it, we just click there and the style is going to be applied. These are custom styles. Some of them are I created myself, some of them I downloaded from capture1.com, and then you have also some built-in styles that come with the software. So yeah, that's something you can play around with from the start. And then we have metadata. Metadata is in a very wide sense. It refers to camera metadata, where you can see all of your file details, and then keywords in the keyword library. There's many different ways to organize your files in a catalog in Capture One. Some people like to use keywords. I prefer to use different structures, like just using folders or using albums. I'm going to cover just a little bit of that today, and then the details we'll leave for the next presentation with the workflow. Right, so this is it regarding the tool tabs. Don't worry if at the start you don't know where everything is. Don't worry if it just seems like a lot. My best advice for those of you who are starting with Capture One is don't be overwhelmed by a lot of things, because Capture One is a very wide software that does a lot of things. So my advice for you is just start here, and there are some of the tools that you don't know, but some of the tools you do know, like exposure or highlight and shadow recovery. So to start with, just stick to the tools you already know. Just do what you already know how to do, and the rest will come naturally. If you want to like edit and you're like passionate about it, we'll just learning a lot along the way. And if not, you can do pretty cool stuff just with the basic tools. So yeah, that is something that I wanted to be clear about. Of course, on the right, we have the thumbnails. I didn't cover them, but yeah, we have here different, in this case, folders. So we have different ways to organize your files here, and the thumbnails will show here. And here on top, we have also some handy tools. I'm going to go down to a photo that's been a little bit edited, like this one I had before, just to show you some of the things that you might appreciate. So exposure warning, for example, you can turn on and off here. You have a before and after tool. That is a very important tool, actually. Sometimes we're just caught up in the process that we just forget where we are coming from, and we just overdo it, and that doesn't look nice. So to avoid that from happening, I'm always using the before and after tool constantly. So you can do it just by pressing the button here, or you can see also there is a keyboard shortcut. This is letter Y. So if you just click on Y on the keyboard, you're going to see it. There is also a split view slider that it can be very useful in some cases, and then you can have a more dynamic view. You have a grid tool also, and the learn button that will just get you to different basic tutorials. So this is also a good place to get started. And copy and apply adjustments. We'll do this in a second. Here we have other tools like auto adjust. If we just want to auto adjust some of the things, we can do it. This is just not working so great because this was already edited, but yeah, there is an auto adjust feature. It's automatic. It means that sometimes it works great, sometimes it just doesn't, it's not quite there yet. Normally it works okay in my experience. So if you want to start by just using the auto adjustments and then fine tuning, that's also a very good place to start. Then of course we have the reset adjustments. This is also an important one. So if we just click here, we can see what we used to have, like just go back to the raw file. This is something we need to be clear about. So because this is a raw file editor, this is non-destructive editing. It means we could always come back to what we used to have before, and you can do as many variants as you want, and your original file will never be destroyed. So this is the walk through the interface. I know I took some time to explain that, but I think it's important that we are all in the same page, and I think it's important for you to follow the rest of the presentation. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start by creating a new catalog, just like simulate what we would do the first time we open Capture One. Let's import some files, like just very briefly classify them to show you some tricks on how to do that. And then we'll do some editing, right? Okay, so I'm just going to go over here, File, New Catalog, and then I'm just going to place it on my desktop. I'm going to call it Bedford. I'm going to place it on my desktop simply because it's easier for me to show you if anyone has questions. But please don't store your catalogs on the desktop, okay? It doesn't end well. Well, that's my advice. Right, so when we create a new catalog, we come over here to library. There's still nothing here. So let's just click here on import images. You can also find the importer over here on the top left corner, or just simply click here. That's what I usually do. There is also a lot of stuff into this importer, but today I'm not really stopping here to explain all the options. I'll do that in the next session. So the things that concern us today is the import from and the import to tools. So import from, pretty self-explanatory. You just choose a folder that you want to use to import your files. And then you can just get it over there. Let's just say, for example, this one where there is like probably some random clothes or jackets or something like that. Maybe that's empty, but yeah. So yeah, for example, you have some files here. You can also choose from here from the history. I've heard that some of you are really into landscape editing. So I'm going to use some landscapes today. So this is the folder I'm choosing. In here, there is the import to option. This is basically just telling Capture One where you want your files to be stored. There is 3 different options. There is add to catalog that I'm going to use today. And there is also a brief explanation below. So your files will stay where they are. It means that when you are this is the option you need to use when you are importing files from a folder that already exists in your computer and is already where it's supposed to live technically forever, or hopefully forever. And the files will not be copied anywhere. It will just link them to the Capture One catalog. Capture One will create previews, and these previews is what you're going to be using for your editing, right? Then there is copy into catalog that will just duplicate files, and I don't really recommend you to do this. And then there is copy to folder. Then you can just choose a folder that you want to use. And this is what I recommend you to do when you are importing straight from your SD card. So it's like importing your files into your computer, just like copying them safely to your computer and instantly adding them to Capture One. So for today, as I said, add to catalog. I know there are some questions piling up, but let me just cover the importing first, and then I can take some of those just to not lose my thread completely. So before starting to call the images, I'm going to show you a really cool feature. It's called the viewer. And the viewer, it's really nice to just be a little bit more exclusive with what you're importing into the catalog. This folder only has around 30 files, so it's not critical the time that it's going to take to import them. But it would be different if we had 3,000 files. Let's say that we showed a wedding, or like we went out to the field and we showed, I don't know, thousands of images. If you want to import all of these images into Capture One, it's going to take a while. Well, in Capture One or any other software, basically, it's going to take a while. So one way to reduce the time that it's going to take, it's just reducing the number of files. So we can use the viewer to pre-call them and just to shorten the importing time just by not importing some things that we don't need. So let's say that I want these files, I want this one, and then we can just choose our favorite files. In case you're wondering how I'm moving along the images, it's very intuitive. I'm just using the up and down arrow, And then to select and deselect, I'm just using the space bar, and you can see that the selection is starting to appear there. So yeah, let's do some culling. I'm going to bring in some of these files, and then we'll choose one to work with. I hope you like France, and I hope you like castles, because this is all from last summer in France. It's a really cool place, actually. This was a bike route, and it was really nice. Okay, so I think these are okay. These are enough files. It's just 14 files, so that won't take a long time. And once I made sure that I selected everything, I'm going to just import all of these 14 files. As you can see, some things happen here. So in here in the library, we got all of these files showing up right here. Some collections were created in the catalog collections. This is happening automatically, okay? You don't have to do nothing about this, but some collections are created. So all images that will basically just show you all the images you import into your catalog. So right now, if we just went and import more files, they would show into the all images collection. We have recent imports, and these are the ones that are created automatically. Of course, when we are starting to bring a lot of files into our catalog, things start to get complicated, and it can get messy if we don't have like a certain way to do it. There is plenty of ways to organize your files in Capture One and many other softwares. So you can use user collections, which is what I'm going to show you today. You can use filters based on different things like metadata, keywords, star rating, color tags, and all sorts of things. And there is keywords. Also, you can create a keyword library. Typically, I don't use keywords. I know that people are like very into it sometimes. It's just not for me. And one thing that you also need to understand when you are creating your catalog and you're trying to bring in all of your files is that it's really important to get it right, because this is where all of your files are going to live. And then in, let's say, 5 years from now, you need to go back to your catalog and look for a certain photo because a client asked you, or because you want to print it, or whatever reason. It's important that you know how to find it. So that's why I recommend you to just create some certain criteria that work with you. It doesn't have to be the same that I'm doing, because everyone has a different logic in our mind. So what I'm doing might not be logical for you, but it might be logical for me. And then, you know how it is. So basically, just create your criteria and stick to them, and just think to the future and think that in 5 years from now, you should be able to understand what you were doing today. So I know there is some questions. I'm just going to answer a couple of them before moving forward. So someone was asking about destructive or non-destructive editing. As I said, Capture One is non-destructive editing always. Some people were already answering some reasons why switching to Capture One. There is plenty of reasons, in my opinion. The tools are great, like especially the tools to work with colors, the possibility to work with layers. For example, do things like sharpening or noise reduction in layers really makes a difference when you are striving for fine detail. But for me, as I said before, the main reason was seeing my files, my own photos in Capture One. The first time I opened Capture One and I brought my files in, they were so different. They literally look so different. It was some years ago. I was still a student back then. And no one ever explained me what to do with my files. No one ever explained me how to properly edit them, how to properly catalog them. And I was like super lost with my life. I hated editing so much. And I was very frustrated by the fact that I was using another software before, and the colors were not quite there. It just didn't feel okay, didn't look okay. And I became really demotivated. And then I learned about Capture One. I tried it, and I was like, wow, this really is what I was looking for. And I could just be much more creative with color. And I just created my workflow there, and it was like the world of a difference to me. So that's my personal reason. Some people mention other stuff, which is totally fine. Liz has been also answering some of them. I don't have sessions, but catalogs, that's totally fine. Some people just work with sessions, some people work with catalogs, some people work with both. I tend to be more of a session person, but yeah, that's up to you. And seems like we're good for now. As I said, I will leave more time in the end for the questions, so please don't hesitate to put them there. Awesome, and thanks, Liz, for keeping up with all of those. Right, so let's do some organizing before we start with the fun part of editing. as I said, we have here recent import collection that might not be ideal when we are looking forward to build a catalog with 15,000 images. So let's just see some things that we can do. These are all landscapes, but let's just create an album and let's call it landscapes, and let's just bring in there some things that are nice, like some things that we might want to edit today, even if we won't have time for everything. An album is basically a virtual collection. It means that your files will not be moved in your computer. They won't be duplicated, but it's just like an internal organization structure of Capture One. So we're going to create this album. We're going to call it landscapes. The album for now, it's empty. So what we have to do is bring the photos inside. So some way that I really like to do it, it's like let's just go to all images in this case. And I like to use the grid view. The grid view is this kind of view, and you can turn it on and off very easily just by pressing on the keyboard shortcut G, right? So you can see that just by pressing G, you go back and forth from editing to culling view. So that's really nice. There is also, there is like my zoom controls here. So now I'm back and I can see. There is also a possibility to customize the size of the previews. For culling, what I typically do is just to set them like very big, like XL or L. Probably L is better for this resolution that I have right now. So L. And that just allows us to, be able to cull some of the photos while not having to go through all of them in the same place. So I'm just going to choose a couple of those. Let's just say this for example. And once I selected the photos that I want to classify, I'm just going to drag them to my new album. You can see it turns on the blue sign, and then my photos are in the album. Of course, you can create as many albums as you like. You can organize the albums in groups or like bigger organization hierarchies. But for now, I'm just going to stick with the album just to keep it simple. We can go back to the view, and then we can do like a little bit more advanced culling. So for example, let's say that the photo I want to edit today, it's this one. This is my favorite. So I'm going to give it 5 stars to just let myself know this is the photo I chose. So you can do it just by clicking here on the different points, and you can like 4, 3, 4, 5 stars, whatever you want. Or the fast way to do it is using the keyboard shortcuts again. So it's pretty self-explanatory. It's numbers from 0 to 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is how you can cull your images easily. So, okay, I selected this image, and then because this is a similar one, we might actually be able to just get away with it by copying and applying the adjustments from the previous photo. So I'm also going to select it. And then if we want to just focus on what we selected and forget about the rest for a minute, we can turn on a filter, and that will just leave us with whatever we chose. So if I turn on the filters for 5 stars, then we are able to see only 5 stars. Pretty logical, right? We can turn it on and off. We can turn on different filters in the same time. So yeah, we're going to start here. Let's do some editing, maybe. Someone was asking like a box to compare different images. So what I typically tend to do for this case is like just choose them all, and then just like do something like this. And then you can also zoom in 100% and synchronize the moving along the photos just to make sure like you got the details right. And then you can just do that independently, or you can synchronize the moving. I think that's pretty cool, actually. I didn't know that for a long time. And then when I found out about it, it was very useful for my life, let's say. Right, so let's come back here. This is our first shot, and let's do some basic editing here. So when you start to edit, and doesn't matter that you're using Capture One or Lightroom or whatnot, what I recommend you to do is to build a workflow and stick to it and repeat it all over and over and over again. Not only because this will be more efficient, but also because this will help you understand what the images need or what you actually want to do to the images. Because I'm sure that you're familiar with this feeling like, okay, you import your files, you're looking at them, and it's like, I really don't know what to do with them. They look fine, so I don't know how to make them better. So having this kind of tidy workflow will help you overcome this feeling when you import your files. And then by following some steps, you will be able to better see what you're doing and to better think ahead. So what we want to do here, what I do first is cropping and correcting rotation if needed. Then I work with the basic tools like exposure, curves. Today we're going to work with contrast instead of curves to keep it simple, but normally what I would do is cropping and rotation, keystone if there was any need for that, curves, exposure, high dynamic range, and then I would move on to work with color and probably adding some vignette. This is my order that I preset for doing this, and it's what makes the most sense to me. So we would start here on the lens correction. Also, you can see that the lens profile is already applied. So I'm not going to correct any distortion because that's already corrected by default on Capture One because the lens is compatible. It means it has a specific profile, and just like what happens with the cameras, Capture One is adapting the preview to how the lens is treating the image. So what we're going to do here is just to use some auto rotate. We'll just see how the auto works. I think the auto worked perfectly in this case, so I'm happy with that. No need to do anything else. And then I'm going to do some cropping. We can use it from here, from the same interface. For this kind of landscapes, instead of keeping the original aspect ratio, I tend to use more panoramic aspect ratios because, I think it just helps underline the horizontality, if that makes any sense for you. So I'm going to choose an aspect ratio of 16:9. This is the same aspect ratio as Full HD video, for example. So just like that, the grid will show up if we set it to do. So for example, here I have it selected to grid, follow crop. So it will just show when I'm cropping, or I could also show it always if I wanted to. Normally, I just show it when I'm cropping, and this will help me to get a nice composition here. All right, so this is my cropping. This is in the first place. I already did something. And as I said, what I'm going to do now is move on to the basic tools. If we took a look at the histogram, we can see that we are lacking some contrast here. We have different ways to add contrast. I would typically use a curve because it's a little bit more advanced and it lets you do some stuff that you can't do with the contrast slider. You can also use levels if you want to. For now, I'm going to keep it easy and I'm going to just use contrast. So let's add some contrast. Let's see what happens. You see when we are adding contrast, if you take a look at the histogram while I do that, you can see that the histogram is kind of being pulled from the sides. So the shadows are going to be darker and the highlights are going to be lighter. So that's the whole thing. That's going to give us a little bit more depth into the photo. But also we might end up with very dark places or like too bright places. So in order to balance that out, I'm going to use the high dynamic range. So when we are adding some contrast, the thing that we might want to do, especially with landscape editing, is just opening up the shadows just a little bit. You can see that we actually have a lot of room to recover details from shadows and, well, of course, highlights too. Of course, I'm not going to leave the photo like that, but it's just to show you how powerful this tool is. This is one of the first tools that shocked me when I started using Capture One. So I'm resetting that back and I'm starting from the beginning and I'm going to open up the shadows a little bit. I don't want to make it too bright because I want kind of a moody look in this image. I'm going to bring down the highlights just a little bit. I would always try to avoid bringing down the highlights too much because we might end up with a very dark sky and then it looks unnatural, because in this kind of landscape photo, the only source of light we have is actually the sky where the sun is, somewhere behind these clouds. So if we bring down these highlights too much, it might start looking unnatural. So just a little bit to bring back some of the detail in these clouds. And then we might also want to add some clarity. For those of you who don't know, clarity is kind of a contrast, but it only works with the midtones. So in a nutshell, what it's going to do, it's going to help us to add some feeling of depth, kind of. So if we bring it too far, it will start also looking unnatural, which is something that we would try to avoid. But if we just bring a little bit more, you can see that it's working nicely. We might want to open up the shadows a little bit more after that because some of the darker midtones might also be going a little bit lower. So I think that we are good around there. We have contrast, we have detail, and that is good. And we might want to just brighten it up just a little bit, or that depends actually what you want to do. Something around there. And that would be my basic adjustment. So just to recap, we first did the cropping and the rotation. Now we did exposure, high dynamic range, and clarity, and contrast, which is this next here with the tool of exposure. And that would be the basic adjustments. Now, if we want to take things a little bit further, we can work with color a little bit, which is something I always enjoy doing. So we're just going to go here into the color tool tab. If you remember, this is why I said before, like everything is quite logical except this one for me, because I would always switch from the composition to the exposure and then back to color. But yeah, sometimes I would just reorder these tool tabs, but as I said, I'm just going to keep it standard for today. So yeah, let's work with color a little bit. The first thing I normally use, which is the tool that probably all of you know, is white balance. Some people tend to use white balance as a way to neutralize the color in the images. I'm more the opinion that you can use it creatively. So in this kind of image where I don't really care what was what, I just want it to look good. I just want it to be moody. And this is why I want to use the Kelvin and the tint sliders as somewhere creatively. I don't really care what is actually the neutral white or the neutral gray. I just want the photo to look good, basically, in this case. And then in other cases where we have skin tones, for example, we might want it to be a little bit more accurate scientifically, so to say. But for this tool, for this time, I just want it to look good. So because I want it to be a little bit moody, I'm going to cool the image down a little bit. I'm going to make it, I don't want to make it too green because then the sea might start looking green, and I really don't want that. So I think this is a good balance. If we want to take a look at what we are doing, it's important to turn on and off the before and after and just see if this is closer to what we want to achieve. In this case, I am happy about it. So I'm just going to go on working with color. So we already used the white balance, and there is another tool that I really, really enjoy doing, which is the color balance. The color balance, it's very intuitive to use. I know there is like a lot of stuff the first time you open it, but it's actually pretty intuitive too, so just bear with me. So we have here, I'm going to just use the three-way mode. We have here 3 different color wheels. I picked up before in the chat that someone is using DaVinci Resolve. So if you've been using that software, you already know what this is about. This is a split toning tool. So what we can do with this tool is add different tints to shadows, to midtones, and highlights, all right? And that's going to help us a lot to work creatively with color. So the way I use this tool, what I tend to use, it's the shadows first, and then the highlights. And sometimes I use midtones, and sometimes I don't, and I just stick with shadows and highlights. And I like to use it in the way that we can use complementary colors. That is the colors that are exactly in the opposite part of the color wheel. So let's see how this works. We have this circle in the middle of the wheel, and then if we just push it all the way to the outer part of the outer ring, we're going to see a very strong tint appearing. And if we move around the circle, we'll see that we have different tints that we can apply. So I just typically choose this saturated effect just to choose the tint that I want to work with. I, for example, like this kind of blue tint, but it's too much, it's too saturated. So what I'm going to do is here, now that I chose actually the color that I want to apply into the shadows, it's going to go all the way to the left slider and desaturate it completely. And that will just give me the starting point. And then I will just move it gradually up, just slowly like that, until I see what amount of the effect I want to apply. If we go too far, it's a little bit too overdone. But if we choose to stay somewhere around here, I think that gives an interesting effect, and that is helping us to get away from the natural camera colors, which might not be what we want to do in this image. Then, as I said, what I like to do is work with the contrary, so the highlights, and I'm going to choose the contrary part of the wheel. So if we did blue before, I'm just going to go over to the yellow here. And as before, I'm just going to go all the way here. I think I will try to stick between yellow and orange, but just for the sake of trying, I'm going to go around the wheel again, so you can see how you can get to different tones and maybe find out something that you like better. So I think this kind of warmer tone will look better. Again, this is too much, so same thing, just grabbing the slider, putting it all the way down, and then gradually increasing the saturation. And in here, I'm just going to do a little bit because I don't want it to be too much. So this is what I would normally do. And this is the before and after of this photo. No, we can also do it like that. I typically prefer to just show the whole before and after. It's easier for me just to see it quickly like that. So this is where we came from, and this is where we ended at. Of course, there is so many more tools that you could use in this photo. You could work in this photo for as long as you like, basically, but you might not want to work in it for too long. So I think that this is quite acceptable. The only thing that I would do maybe would be just like adding some vignette to add a little bit of depth into the photo. Nothing too drastical, but something just subtle. So I think this is an acceptable ending point for this photo. So I would mark it as done. And to do that, what I normally do is I choose a green tag. So I'm going to tag this file green, and that's going to help me filter the images that I want to export later on. So I think this is nice. As we said before, we have this other photo from the same day from a similar scenario. So I think we can just get away with copying these adjustments and applying it to others. That's probably a little bit too cold for this photo, but I kind of like it. I think it works nicely. If so, I would just do it. I would just warm it up just a little bit, something like around there, and maybe darken it up just a bit, maybe more from the brightness part than from the exposure. So yeah, and both of them are quite okay. Of course, as I said, we could work better and we could do so much more, but this is just meant to be an introductory session. So I think that we're just going to leave it there editing wise, and we'll have more editing along the next presentations. So because I also edited this one kind of, I'm going to tag it green. Then if we wanted to, let's apply some preset for fun, just to finish it up. I do tend to add grain to all of my images. And there is some styles that I have here for grain. They are here in the Beyond Film collection, which is a very nice style collection if you're looking out for some nice styles. Also, something that you can do once that you are finished with the thumbnails, and if you want to focus better on the images, you can hide the thumbnails just by a keyboard shortcut. It's Command V, if that helps you. And that might give you a better view of what you're doing. So I'm just going to choose a preset for grain, and I'm going to apply it for both images. And you could use a preset just for grain, or you could complement it with other stuff. You could choose a black and white style. So or you can even do like different versions of the image, right? I think I prefer the silver one on the second thing. If you want to see it better, probably we can just zoom in 100%. And I really like this silver grain. In Capture One, there is different kinds of film grain. There is like silver, soft, tabular, well, all of these here. But of course, you can also create your own presets. And I really like the grain in Capture One because it feels very organic. I mean, I think it's as good as it gets without switching completely to film. So yeah, there is that. So I think this grain looks good. Just for fun, and because I said I will show you a style, I'm going to show you how to create another version of the same photo and edit it differently. So just choosing this one again, and I'm going to clone this variant. This means that you're creating a virtual copy, okay? The file will not actually be duplicated. It's just a virtual copy that exists only in Capture One. So I'm going to reset this one, and well, maybe I'm just going to reset the exposure and the high dynamic range and whatnot. And I'm just going to use a black and white style. And then I can keep the same composition, which I think it's nice. So let's choose one in the beyond black and white part. These are very nice styles, I think. And I want something like moody but contrasted in the same time. I think this one is nice, I think. So I'm just going to click here and there's done. There I have my black and white style. And I think that we are ready to export these files. So let's go back to the library now. Because we have already selected the 5 stars filter, we could just filter it like that and select all images. And we could also use the green tags filter. It doesn't make a lot of sense now, but if you go back to all images and you try to filter now, I think what makes the most sense is to use the green, because if you remember, the green is what I use to like auto tell myself these images are already edited and they are ready to be exported. So yeah, I think that we're ready to export. Just going to address some questions before we move on to exporting, and then we will be done and ready to answer all of the rest. There is a very good question actually from Jose Daniel. What is the difference between brightness and exposure? So in short, what exposure is going to do, just let me show you on this photo actually. I think it will be easier to see. So in short, what exposure does, if I go with exposure all the way to the right, if I do that and meanwhile just take a look at the histogram, what is happening is that the whole histogram, the whole signal, it's moving over to the right. Okay, so that's going to include everything in the image, like shadows, midtones, and highlights. Everything is going to move over to the right. That means that everything is going to be brighter. If I move it over to the left, well, the same thing. The whole histogram is going to be moving all the way towards the left. That is towards the shadows. So it will make everything darker. Okay, that is understandable, probably. And then we have the brightness. What happens if I move the brightness all the way to the right? You can see some changes appearing, and you can see some things happening in the histogram, but it's not as aggressive as exposure. The reason why is because exposure is just affecting everything, while brightness is only affecting the midtones. If you take a closer look here at the histogram, maybe I could just pop it out and make it a little bit bigger for you to see it better. There is actually 3 lines that are dividing the histogram into 4 sections. So this section is what we call the shadows. This is what we call the highlights, where you can see most of the information is right now. And these 2 parts here will be midtones. So lower midtones, higher midtones. So this part, these midtones here are what it's going to be affected by the brightness. So if I go to 0, that will be like the normal thing. All the way to the right, some things are happening, but the shadows and the highlights will not be so affected. And all the way to the left, the same thing. The shadows and the highlights, well, they are affected, but they are not as affected as it would be with exposure. So just again, yeah, this is like completely blowing everything up. And here it's like just too dark. So I hope that answers your question. Some of the questions over here. One about the Nick collection for styles. Yes, the Nick collection for styles, it's a very good collection. I don't use it though, but I've heard great things of it, and it is compatible with Capture One. And there is some videos online that will help you set that up. Okay, I'm going to go back right into export in a second, so I will skip that one for now. But then I'll answer your question. And some Fujifilm user around there. Yeah, and the Fujifilm files in Capture One, they just look amazing. There's that. And of course, you can, these are actually Fuji files as well. So you can even use the original Fujifilm film simulations, which are great. So if I wanted to use, let's say, an Acros film simulation or an Astia film simulation, or whatever of the original Fuji simulations, they are all here, and you can apply them and change them as you want and use them as a starting point. And it's just brilliant, honestly. I love Fuji files in this sense. Right. So can custom styles be added in layers for easy on-off choices? Yes, styles can be applied in layers as long as they are not black and white, because the black and white tool is not compatible with layers. But if you're using colors, then yes, you can stack them in layers, which is actually pretty nice. All right, so let's go on to exporting, and then I will take the rest of your questions. So I'm going to select all, Command A to select all of the images in the collection. And then right next to the import, there is the export. That is logical. And we have this pop-up window showing up. And here we have different options. Let's just cover the basics today. We have what we call export recipes. Export recipes are basically presets for exporting. So we can have different presets for exporting for different purposes. All of these, including the PSD one, they already come with Capture One. They are pre-made and they are like generic. And then, of course, you can create your own. So, for example, if you have a printer and you want to create a specific recipe for your printer, then you can do that, of course. And for today, I'm just going to use actually 3 different export recipes. Another cool thing about working with recipes, besides that it's much easier and faster, it's that you can select as many recipes as you want. So if you want to export all of these photos in different formats with different compression rates and with different sizes or different color spaces, you can do it just from one click, which I think it's quite nice. So all of these that already come pre-selected, I think I have some dimensions here. So I'm just going to use fixed 100% so it won't create any trouble. But the formats and sizes are already pre-made. So in this case, because I selected the TIFF recipe, it's a TIFF, this 16 bits and compressed. I do tend to work with compression because honestly, it's not that much of a difference. And it reduces the size of the files considerably. So I think it's worth it. And we would choose Adobe RGB, which is already pre-made. And there's that. There is a summary of the tool. And then we can create subfolders for different recipes. So we have to choose a folder, like for the global of like where things are going to be. I'm going to use the desktop. Again, don't use the desktop in your real life because it does not end well. But for demo purposes, you will allow me to use the desktop today, right? So desktop. And I'm going to create a subfolder where all my TIFFs will be stored because I typically don't want random files floating around the desktop without knowing what they are, or like maybe even better, I can just give it a name, Bedford TIFFs, and then they will just go there. There is another one for Instagram. It's already pre-made as well. So it's a JPEG, 80% compression, 1080 pixels, sorry. And you can see that the preview is dynamic. It means it adapts to the settings that are applied in your compression, in your recipe. So in here, we can see the compression applied, and we can see the size changing, actually. And we could also create a subfolder for this one, just to have everything nice and tidy. And then here we have a full-size JPEG with no compression. And, we might want to have it because we want to have it and because it's fun. And that's right. And we can just create these 3 different files from these 3 different files respectively. And in this case, I'm not going to ask to add any subfolder, and it will just go to the desktop. All right. So once I select everything I want to process and I selected the right export recipes and I make sure that all of these are good, I'm going to click on export 3 images. You can see some loading happening here. Okay, this was in my other monitor, but you can see that it's here and it's exporting the variant, and it's going to create some different files. They are already showing in the desktop, just in another monitor, but I'm just going to drag it. It's done now, and I'm just dragging it here. So let's see what happens. These are the files that are just like full-size JPEGs, and I didn't send them to any folder. So these are the full-size JPEGs and my 2 versions in black and white and in color. Here we have the Instagram optimized files, so smaller, different compression. And of course, I have the TIFFs as well, ready for printing. If the colors are a little bit off, it's because it's probably a printing profile. Actually, I think it's Adobe RGB, so they are quite fine. So yeah, this is a way we export files. And of course, this part of like the folders where we are sending the files and whatnot, it should also be part of this criteria that I mentioned you should probably have when you're starting to use Capture One or any other cataloging software, in fact. So yeah, there is that. I think we can open now the floor for questions and answers. I'm going to start, while you think of some more questions, I'm going to start with one question that was actually about exporting that was up there about PSD. Yeah. how do we send the image to Photoshop then back to Capture One for some effect you can't do in Capture One? That is a very good question. So for example, let's say that here I would want to, like, I don't know, clone away this little bird or like some of these poles or something like that. What I would do, like that, I think that the easiest way to do it is just over here into export. You can see there is a little arrow that in Capture One means there is a drop-down menu. So let's just click on this arrow, and we have, besides export and all of that, we have edit with. If you have Photoshop installed in your computer, it will automatically show up here. So you just choose edit with Adobe Photoshop. You have to, of course, again, process the files. For retouching, I would probably use TIFF or PSD. There is not much different to that. Let's just choose PSD for fun. 8 bits or 16 bits. 8 bits is plenty enough for 99% of cases, and Adobe RGB, and we just click on edit. So what's going to happen now is that you can see that a PSD file was created. It's already showing up in Capture One because it's created right next to the original file, and Photoshop already opened up. And now I can just do whatever in Photoshop. Let's just do something very silly and visual for fun. Let's just, I don't know, draw like a star or something. Oh my God, I have to bring up my drawing skills. Well, yeah, just something very silly for you to see the difference. So the moment where we save this file in Photoshop, let's just Command S this file. It's saving now. Yeah, it's saved. Yes, I think so. So the moment we come back to Capture One, the PSD file was updated and it reflected all the changes that I did into Photoshop. So I can just keep all the files cataloged nice and clean into Capture One while taking advantage of the advanced retouching tools in Photoshop. Right. So I hope that answered your question. Let's see, we have some more questions over there. Oh, some friend of the house showed up around here, apparently. And yeah, I don't know if like there is some more questions while you think of anything else. I'm just going to scroll up a little bit and see what I can find. Robert, I think he's a friend of the house. If he's asking if I shoot Fujifilm, the fact is that I own different cameras and I own different brands. The Fujifilm is actually the one I'm using for streaming right now. It's the XS10. I chose it for streaming because it's like very affordable and it's nice for streaming and it has a really nice autofocus feature. And I also take it on trips sometimes. So for example, this trip I was on my bike and I needed a really portable and lightweight camera. So I chose a Fujifilm for that. And all of these photos come from that trip. I also shoot Canon. I sometimes shoot Sony. So, you know, it depends on what I need on the specific moment. But I do love the Fujifilm colors so much. I think color-wise, it's my favorite. Okay. Ronline was asking, is there a way to use the red, blue, or green channel, quote unquote, for black and white conversion? Yes, you can do that. I just applied black and white for a style, but then if I wanted to apply black and white to this photo, for example, I could do that as well. Here, next to all the color tools, we also have the black and white tool. And here we can just enable black and white, and we can use all of these sliders as the filters for the red, green, and blue channels. And then we can just play around with that and find a nice contrast that we like. Probably on the blue channel, we have a lot of information. There's that. So yeah, we can use that to our convenience. I think that, yeah, that's okay. So yeah, this is the way that you can use colors to change the contrast in Capture One. Let's just go again. Okay. Will layers be addressed in future presentation? Yes, definitely. I actually wanted to do it today, kind of, but then I thought, you know, it might be better to just stick to the basics because I saw a lot of beginner users, which is totally fine. But yeah, we will definitely cover layers, and I really wanted to talk about layers. Okay, some questions about compatibility, about the Tamron compatibility. I really don't know when it will be supported. I'm sorry, but you can set a feature request in our forum just to, if you really want to this lens to be supported, you can just put it there and people can vote your thing. So share it with your friends and maybe in time. The link to the recorded version, this webinar will be staying here on YouTube, so you can just go back to the link and watch it or rewatch it anytime you want. You can try to create, let's call a new export recipe. Yes, so for example, let's just go here to export. Here we have a plus icon, and then we can just create a new recipe right from the start. So for example, I have one of these Canon selfie printers, which are super fun to play with. And for that, I would normally choose a JPEG in sRGB. And if we show the advanced, we would typically choose some dimensions. Normally I would use centimeters, but I don't want to create any controversy, so I'm not going to do that. But yeah, just showing you what you can do. You can actually use output sharpening for printing and just preset it as you want, and come back to it whenever you want to print with this printer or something like that. All right, there is a lot of questions actually. Do we have time to answer them? I'm okay with doing that, unless you're kicking us out, because I'm taking a little bit longer than expected. Hope that's fine for everyone. There is also a question from Ko about the GPS data from the camera. Yes, if the GPS data is there, it's just going to be showing here in the metadata. In this case, there is none, but it would just typically show here in the metadata fields. So I don't know, like someone wants to interrupt me. Do we still have time for that?
Yeah, I see we we have several Lightroom users, and they're asking if you could list 2 or 3 advantages for switching from Lightroom to Capture One.
Okay, so for me, it would be speed, especially when you are shooting tethered, which we will cover in the next session. Speed for tethering is fantastic. Also, catalogs are very snappy, specifically since the last 2 or 3 releases. It's very, very fast. Color accuracy, and like the way your files look when you open them up in Capture One. As I said, just try it yourself, try it with your own photos, and you'll notice the difference. It's like, for me, that's the top one, actually. So yeah, that, tethering, and editing with layers, which is super flexible and also really fun. There is one of my favorite tools that I couldn't show today. This is the style brushes, and it's just like brushes with pre-made adjustments, and they all come with Capture One, and they are super fun to work with. Like, for example, if you want to just like do dodge and burning or something like that, or you want to like, let's just recover some specific shadows in some specific part, you can just brush the adjustments in, and it's like so fun and easy to use, especially if you have a Wacom tablet. You don't necessarily need one, but it's just like really fun. That's like for me the top things, like tethering, colors, and layers.
I agree. Oh, I was going to jump in. Is that okay? Hello, everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
From Capture One here. Nice to see some familiar names in the chat. I thought this was such a great question. And I'm curious for those in the chat who have come from Lightroom, if you can add maybe a little bit about your experience in the chat, and list the reasons why you came from Lightroom to Capture One. But I think that the color management is definitely the biggest advantage. If you have not brought your own file into Capture One, I highly recommend downloading the free trial and bringing a file in to really see and experience the difference. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, that's totally right.
No, absolutely. I did have someone asked a question about concerning black and white. I think this is very interesting. Someone says when you're in the black and white, when you convert it to black and white, where do you change the individual red, green, or blue channels? Okay,
there is no way to change the individual channels. Like there is these channels here, like red, green, and blue. And then you can also, of course, use layer curves or levels, for example. They still work even if you're in black and white. So black and white is on. And then if we go all the way here to curves or levels, let's just use curves for fun. We can use the red, green, and blue channels. So if I go down with the red channel, you can see the oh, I'm sorry, I'm on a layer. So yeah, you can see that it's only affecting the red channel, and then the green and the blue are also being affected independently. Like for example, here you can see that it's having mostly an effect on the grass, and the blue will probably have an effect mostly on the sky and on this part over here, which is colder. So yeah, that will be the way to affect the different channels independently. I left out today all of the curves, which is fascinating, I think. But I will leave that for the advanced editing class.
We also had another question. I think this was really interesting. Another question from Robert Troywick. Robert, glad to have you. Hope to see you soon, buddy. We have, you had a question about shooting weddings. Can you edit the capture time of images to time sync several cameras?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't get it.
I'm sorry. So when you're shooting a wedding and you have multiple cameras, is there a way you can sync up the time? So when you're calling through those images, you're not seeing the images based on the camera, but the time that they were taken.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, I think since the latest release, that was 2 weeks ago, I think, by default, the images in the all images collection, they come organized by date and time. So that will happen automatically, I think, right now. So you just go to the collection, and by default, it comes like that. And if it doesn't come by default, you can always do it here. And by default, it comes with the date. So that means that whatever camera you shot it with, it will just sort it by date and time. And then you can also like change it and reverse if you want to. I think there is also a very good question from Barry Bloom about migration of your Lightroom catalog. If you migrate your Lightroom catalog at the beginning of your transition to Capture One, can you redo it? I still like the Lightroom catalog system, and I always import images into that first. Yes, you can, but I don't think that's ideal, because I don't think that it will just exclude the images that already. I think I need to look into this, actually. I think it's a very good question. I think if you re-import the whole catalog, it will just like re-import everything again, which will duplicate the files in the Capture One catalog. So yeah, I don't think that you can do that, actually. Maybe you can. I can check it. You can always email us. We are going to leave our email addresses there in the chat. So in case you have any follow-up questions, you can just ask us there. And I would like to investigate this, actually. But I think it's just a matter of getting adjusted, probably. I mean, I don't know what exactly you're using in Lightroom catalog, but I would love to hear what you are using in Lightroom that you don't find in Capture One. I think that would be very good information for us. Thanks.
Maria, I also saw a question or a few questions about this, asking if Capture One is non-destructive.
Correct. Yeah, it is because we just talk a lot about raw files in general, and in these sessions in particular, obviously. But I can see that still some people have gaps in their minds about what a raw file actually is. And we tend to think of raw files as images, but they are not images, actually, not yet. Raw files are data. So in the case of digital data, it's ones and zeros, basically. This means that unless you put them into a software like Capture One or like Lightroom, they will not be translated into images yet. They need to go through the process of interpreting this data, and the raw motor that you're going to use for that, it's going to have an effect in the looks of your images after you exported them. But a raw file is just data, and it's interpreted by the software, and it does not become an image unless it's exported. So when we are working with raw data here, it means that it's just that data is not an actual image. This is why you can't destruct anything in Capture One. You can completely ruin it and then always go back to the beginning, because this data is just safe there.
Is there a way in one of the panels to, I guess, go back in history of what changes you've made?
No, unfortunately, this is not quite there yet. I do agree that it will be super useful, and I hope that this will be brought in soon, because we've heard this request for a long time, actually. We've been focusing on other cool stuff like stitching and merging HDR. I think someone was asking for me to do a stitch. So because I already anticipated this, I already have a possible panorama stitching here. So I'm just going to stitch it. I'm going to show you how to do it and answer this question while I do it. So these are, it's these 3 files, actually. No. Yeah, this is the one. This is a 4-part stitch series. So I can select the 4 photos. It looks really bad right now. It looks really dark, but it will get better, trust me. So I select the 4 files, right click and stitch to panorama. Then we have this pop-up window. There's different projections that we can choose: spherical, cylindrical, perspective, and panini. What for this kind of landscapes, what tends to work the best is like cylindrical or spherical. It generates a previews, and once it does, it will just save it, so you can just compare quickly like that. So, and then the stitch size is going to be, by default, it's 100%, but if you want to reduce it a bit, you can just, because you can end up with pretty large files. So let's just do 50%, and let's click on stitch, and then that's going to stitch the photo. It takes really, it's very fast actually, and the stitching should be here. And then this generates a DNG, a linear DNG, and then you can just basically treat it as a raw file, and then you can start with the magic of editing and, you know, like do a lot of stuff here. And yeah, this is how you do the stitching. It's pretty easy, it's self-explanatory, as you can see. Right, so
would you also, I don't know if you have any images ready right now for showing how an HDR or I guess, what am I trying to think of here, Robert? Putting different images together. If you had bracketed some images and using the HDR function.
So focus stacking we can't do yet. So that I can't do. There is the option to do HDR panel together, and there is an HDR function, which I should have some examples around here. Yes, I do. So this is actually a merge HDR, but I'm just going to delete this one and do it from the beginning. Oh, this is also the HDR. So by the way, these photos are not mine. These are gorgeous photos from a photographer from Spain who is called Jose Maria Mellado, and he's like the guru of panoramic photos and HDR merging, at least in for Spanish speakers. So if you don't know his work, check him out because it's awesome. So we select in this case, this is only bracketing of 2 photos, and the process is quite similar. You just have to make sure that it's as steady as possible, probably using a tripod, and that you have all of the information in the image. And then you can just right click on it and select merge to HDR. If we choose auto adjust, it will just apply adjustments on top of the stitching. But as I said, these are non-destructive, but we're just going to unclick it. And if we wouldn't have a tripod, then we would just choose auto align. I'm just going to leave it on in case, but yeah. And then that's going to be merging. The amount of time it takes, this takes a little bit longer because these photos have more resolution than my Fuji files. So the time it takes, it depends on how many photos you're merging, the resolution of the photos, and of course the power of your computer. So yeah, this might take a little bit longer. Yes, you can blend several images, of course. This is just what I have at hand. I typically don't shoot much of HDR myself, to be honest. So this is why I don't have many more examples of this. But I think that's a very interesting topic, actually. So it might be on for another session with some collaborator who is more expert into that. Then if we see the image here, it doesn't look like so different from this one, for example. But we actually have a lot more information to play around with. So if we bring up, let's just do it like all the way down. Shadows and highlights, you have an incredible amount of information in this photo. And then we can just choose to stick to whatever we feel we want to do with this. So yeah, that's how you do the HDR and the panorama stitching. Good that I anticipated this and I had some files around. Right.
Excellent. Yeah. And Robert Trewick is chiming in. It's always great to hear from you, Robert.
Wow,
Robert was
he's
excited
from
to hear
Sevilla.
that you are. Robert was excited to hear that you're Spanish, and because he has some heritage from Seville.
Oh,
so
nice.
he's very excited. Also, I was wondering, I don't know if you were going to talk about it in another session, but I kind of came across this by accident one day, and there's a sort of like focus peaking lines. It's focus mask, I think is what it's called.
Yep.
It was so unusual, but it was so neat to see, especially as I was calling through images. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, you
What
have
a
to
neat
add it. It's not by default there, but of course you can also add it if you want. So yeah, it's a focus mask. It's really useful for coloring, as you said.
I mean, I used it on a few portraits, and it was amazing to see, when did it hit the eye, when did it hit the nose?
Yeah, that's a nice one. I typically forget this one because I don't use it as much myself, but it's actually a pretty nice one. I should use it more.
Absolutely. Let me pull up another question here. Someone says, I've selected photos to import and capture one. For the unselected photos, is there a way to separate them from my device folder so that I can delete them and only keep the selected photos?
Okay, yes, you can. The process is going to be a little bit different depending on if you're working on a catalog or on a session. If you delete a file from, I think this is a session, right? It is a session. If you remember, I just trashed the previous HDR merge that I did. So it came here to the trash folder. I'm going to turn this off because it just makes everything really weird. As you can see, I demoed this feature a number of times. So yeah, this will just go to the trash folder in the session. It doesn't mean it's deleted. And if you want to delete it completely, you can just go into the trash and then just click delete from disk, and you can do all of that. Like you can do this in the batch with the whole folder. If you're in a catalog, on the contrary, let's just go back to the catalog, see what happens. You can do that as well. Let's say that we just don't want to delete this panorama. So it will be moved to the catalog trash. And then in the catalog trash, you can also choose to delete it from this. Just to make sure, Capture One will ask you, hey, this is going to completely remove your file from existence. Do you want to do that? Or do you just simply want to remove the file from the catalog? Then if you choose delete from disk, it will just make it go away forever. It doesn't go to the trash can in the system, okay? It's just like gone forever. So yeah, keep that in mind. Right. So wow, Robert is finalist from Sevilla. That's so cool. I've never knew that. Yeah, we have some common heritage.
Exactly. I think Robert's mother is from Spain.
Awesome.
And Robert speaks Spanish fluently, and cool. I did notice on I believe, Maria, on your Instagram you have you have information about Capture One in Spanish. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I have an Instagram. I haven't been super active recently, but I do have it, and there's a ton of stuff there. It's at Capture One Trainer, and I do have a blog. It's all in Spanish for my fellow Spanish speakers, and same thing. I haven't updated it for a while, but there is a lot of stuff in there. Trust me. And if you want to have more information and you speak Spanish or read Spanish at least, that's probably a good place to start.
Absolutely. It's always, if Spanish is your preferred language, that would be an excellent resource for you. Let me see if there are any other, two questions here, or comment and a question. There were several people saying, thank you for having two options to get the software, one through a subscription fee as well as a perpetual fee. So Maria and Liz, I don't know if you have control over that, but thank you for doing that. Some of us like to just buy it once and own it forever. So that's welcomed. And then also we have somebody asking, will Capture One be providing any sky selection tool in the future?
I think that's a great idea, honestly. So yeah, why not? I mean, I can't reveal anything now, but I think it will be super cool actually. So I have a team look into it. Okay, I think I'm going to give it over to Liz so she can talk about the different licensing options, because you've been talking about the perpetual license and the subscription. Some people might be a little bit confused. So I'm going to write down my Instagram and blog in the chat for people to check it out if they want to. And then she can talk about licensing.
Awesome. Thank you, Maria. So yes, we'll go over the two different options for Capture One. So you can purchase Capture One via a subscription direct on the Capture One website. If you are interested in a perpetual license, They are available through authorized resellers like Bedford's Camera. We are extending a promotion today. So our friends over at Bedford's Camera have offered, it's a 30% discount. So you can get that off of the Capture One, the full version. So it's one user with 3 activations. So you can use it up to 3 different devices. So normally the regular price is $299, so it's $209 today. And then there is also, this is a really cool option, is if you are looking to purchase any other item through Bedford's Camera, like you're purchasing a camera or new lens, lighting equipment, tethering solutions, you can get Capture One for $179. So that's a really great value. You can only get that through an authorized reseller. So if you're interested in checking that out, just call the store and they can help make that happen for you. It is a physical sleeve and there's a license code, and you would just go ahead and activate that. So that's a really great special that Bedford's is offering through March 10th, 2022. I'm going to throw the date out there for those that are watching the replay on YouTube. So if you're joining us today, you're welcome to check out that deal with Bedford's.
Absolutely. Oops, sorry about that. Thank you all for coming into this class. This will be made available on our YouTube channel to watch again later if you weren't able to make it through the entire session. If you came in late or you had to leave early, not a problem. Feel free to go to our YouTube channel and look under the live tab, and you'll find this video. We're going to have some more over the next couple of months. So I know Maria has her work cut out for her, so she probably has pages and pages of notes that she's ready to just give us good information. And then Liz, thank you so much for helping us out today. We're going to let everybody go about their day. I think this has been a great session. I'm excited to see where this goes. Again, if you haven't touched Capture One before, go to their website, get the free trial, try it out. If you want to go ahead and purchase it, there's a great deal going on. And if you need anything else, please, contact Bedford Camera on Facebook or Instagram or here on YouTube. And then Liz and Maria are also available. So the Capture One folks are really, really smart, and they answer questions rather quickly from what I've seen. And I just want to thank both of you for putting this on today.
Thank you, Tyler. We appreciate your help getting this together. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I also wanted to let you guys know the next class with Bedford is on the calendar, and that's for May 24th. So you can check that out through the Eventbrite link. I will try to get that posted on the YouTube chat. So if you want to register for the next class, we look forward to seeing you guys all again soon.
Thank you all for the nice comments. See you next time.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.